Hey there, Taka here, and today I'm going to talk about Nintendo, specifically the Virtual Console, or lack thereof, and their unwillingness to offer their classic games to consumers in a way that is sensible and a good business decision, in my opinion. So before I had done a rant about Final Fantasy 15 a few days ago, and I kind of just did it free form without any kind of planning or anything. And I'm still going kind of without a script here as well, but I have a general idea of what I'm talking about, and I'm pre-recording it instead of doing it live, so it should be a little bit better. So, Nintendo's been in the news a bit lately with how they've been taking down ROM sites and suing their creators. Now, on one hand, they do have the right to do this. It is their IP, and they do have a right and a responsibility to protect their IP. However, they're not really offering a good alternative to their fans. What do they expect us to do? If they do not give us the option to buy these classic games, what else are we supposed to do but turn to ROM sites? Of course, Nintendo has had the Virtual Console since the Wii, and it's also appeared on the 3DS and the Wii U. However, it's not on the Switch, and really the selection of games has not been perfect. I mean, before the Wii came out, back when it was still known as the Nintendo Revolution, before we knew anything about it, they had announced the Virtual Console, and it sounded like an amazing idea at the time. You could buy all these classic games that you always wanted to play for probably relatively cheap prices, and you didn't have to worry about them being hard to find or jacked up by eBay scalpers. It was a good idea, and I think that Nintendo really dropped the ball with it, especially on the 3DS, where you have so few games, and there's things like locking the Game Boy Advance games behind the Ambassador program, and just overall not giving us all the good games. Not even counting the third-party games. There's tons of first-party Nintendo titles that aren't included in the Virtual Console on any platform. I mean, look at the Virtual Console on the 3DS. The biggest problem being the lack of Game Boy Advance games. And they're there, they do work. If you were a 3DS ambassador, you got a couple of them for free, and there are a few minor issues with them, but they still pretty much work, right? And if you have a modded 3DS, you can actually put any Game Boy Advance game on the system, and it'll work pretty much just fine. But for whatever crazy reason, Nintendo has decided that they don't want to sell them to you. And they could. There's really nothing stopping them from selling games like Super Mario Advance or Zelda Minish Cap, but they don't. And nobody really knows why that is. And they don't seem to care. They don't seem to care that they could be making money. They could, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who would pay money to buy Zelda Minish Cap on their 3DS. And it's there on the eShop. It is technically possible to get if you're an ambassador, but yet Nintendo doesn't want to sell it to you. And this, to me, kind of echoes the biggest problem here, that Nintendo doesn't seem to know what they're doing with their classic games. Sure, the Switch has the free NES game thing, but it's only NES games, and half of them are crap. I mean, could you imagine if they had this kind of model for all of their classic games? Could you imagine if this system had the Super Nintendo, the N64, maybe even the GameCube, and all the Game Boys? It offered you, for a flat amount, unlimited play with all of these games. Even if it wasn't every game, even if they rolled it out slowly, as they are doing. Imagine if you had right now Super Mario World, Link to the Past, Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Pokemon Red. If you had that kind of stuff available to you right there, just for paying a flat amount for a yearly subscription or whatever it is, they could really please a lot of their fans, and they would get more subscriptions by doing this. But for whatever reason, they're just limiting you to a handful of NES games. And as much as I do love NES games, I mean, I grew up on the NES. I've been playing NES games since almost as long as they've been made. And, they're great games, but you have to understand, Nintendo, that the Switch is not only for your classic fans. A lot of the people buying the Switch are kids and teenagers. And while your classic games, your NES games, they are fantastic games, these kind of things don't really interest these kids. They would much rather play Fortnite or Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey or Smash Brothers. That's what they're interested in. They don't care about Super Mario Brothers. They don't care about the original Legend of Zelda. And they might care about, let's say, Ocarina of Time or Super Mario Sunshine. They might be interested in those games because they have a bit more depth than the NES games do. Not saying they're bad, of course. I do love my NES games. But you have to understand that your target market is not me. I am not who you are targeting with the Switch. You are aiming at people who are much, much younger and have much more specific tastes, where they tend to see these classic games that are turned off by them. But either way, you're not offering that kind of a service. You're not offering this wider variety of things, and I think you need to, Nintendo. Even if you don't offer them in the same style, this Netflix style, have everything for a flat price, you need to have those classic games on the system because they're going to be more interested in those games than they will for Super Mario Brothers. But okay, let's say that you don't want to do that. Let's say you don't want to give all your fans all these free games, even if you ended up increasing the subscription price over it. Let's say you want to sell them in the same way that you did with the Virtual Console. That too would be good. I mean, giving them the NES games for free with the subscription, but having everything else be purchasable isn't a terrible idea. But at the same time, they haven't done that yet. They have not even hinted that they're going to do that. They've basically said the Virtual Console will not be a thing on the Nintendo Switch. And it needs to be a thing, especially because the Switch can handle it. If the 3DS can handle up to Super Nintendo games and the Wii U can handle, as far as I know, everything up to GameCube and Nintendo DS games, there's no reason why the Switch can't as well. And I obviously don't see the Switch having DS games unless they seriously rework them or something, but there absolutely needs to be a Virtual Console of some sort, whether it be part of the online subscription or its own purchasable thing, from everything from the NES all the way up to the GameCube, and everything from the Game Boy all the way up to the Game Boy Advance. And to not do that is just a bad business decision, Nintendo. People will buy these games, you know? If I had a Switch, I would buy these games. But you won't sell them to people. And I mean, you could check any internet comment section about the Switch and its online and its Virtual Console or lack thereof, and you will see people saying, hey, Nintendo, give us these games. We want these games. So do it. I mean, what do you have to lose? It can't cost you that much to do. There's especially with first party titles, there's going to be no licensing fees or anything, and they're just emulations. They're all ROMs. They're running on a proprietary emulator that Nintendo has made. And it's a good emulator. I don't think there's been many problems with Virtual Console games in the past. So why isn't it on Switch? But I'm not here just to talk about the Switch and the 3DS and what have you. There is, I think, a very, very big untapped market that I think Nintendo should absolutely get into. And that is the mobile and PC market. Now, they've already had some success with mobile with the likes of Pokemon Go, Super Mario Run, etc. And so they've seen that there is money in the platform. Now, I don't play mobile games. I am disgusted with mobile gaming. I could go on a whole nother rant about that. I probably will in the future. But if we're just talking about Nintendo porting their classic games to mobile and to PC and making them available for a price, and in their own proprietary app for it, then they could see a lot of money coming in, you know? And I don't see anything like post Super Nintendo being on mobile because of the controls being more complex, but I could absolutely see mobile platforms getting NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. It would be foolish of Nintendo to not do it because it's basically free money. There is very little effort in porting their emulators to the mobile platform. And, of course, there would be licensing costs for third-party titles, but there's no reason why there isn't a crapload of first-party titles, classic games, on these platforms. Now, I also don't expect them to put things like Breath of the Wild on PC because that would be cutting into the Switch. And that would probably be a bad idea for them business wise, because if you can just have your PC that you probably already have, why would you go buy a Switch to play Breath of the Wild, right? But as for PC, I think that they need to go almost all out. They need to go from the NES all the way up to the GameCube, and maybe even some Wii games with the motion control stripped out, because while it is possible to have motion controls on the PC, it's not super common. It's you require other things, other hardware in order to have your motion controls on PC. But I absolutely think they should have everything from the NES all the way up to the GameCube, and then the Game Boy all the way up to the Game Boy Advance, and charge people for it. Let people buy your games, Nintendo. We want to buy your games. I mean, you've gone and you've taken away the ROM sites, right? I mean, there will always be the ROM sites. Torrents will always be there, but you've made it a bit more difficult, and you're not offering us the alternatives. There is no good way to buy your classic games right now, Nintendo. The 3DS eShop has a bunch of great stuff missing. I don't know about the Wii U. I don't have a Wii U, so I can't tell you how good it is or bad it is. But the Switch classic game list is very bad. It's not called a virtual console anymore. They're not doing the virtual console for whatever reason. And we need the alternative. We need these classic games to come to Switch, and we need them to come to mobile and PC, because Nintendo, again, this is a good business decision. It will give you a lot of money. There isn't a lot of overlap between, PC gamers and your competitors. You're not competing with PC. You're not competing with mobile. You're competing with Sony and Microsoft. And yes, of course, many PC gamers are running Microsoft OSs, but you're still not directly competing with them, especially if you have your own app store of sorts, where you would have total control of all the profits, and you wouldn't have to give Microsoft a dime of it. You would again, it's basically free money. You're porting emulators. Why will you not do it, Nintendo? Why will you not give your fans the opportunity to give you money? There's no point in holding them back. I don't know who is making these decisions, especially in regards to your actual platforms, like the Switch, but in my opinion, you absolutely need to port these classic games to PC and mobile, and of course, the Switch. And I'm sure some people will argue the piracy angle. They'll say, well, if you bring these games to PC, then people are going to pirate them. But that's stupid, because people are going to pirate them anyway. There are tons of ROM sites out there, and even though Nintendo shut down a few of them, it doesn't really matter. Sure, they sued a couple people into the ground, but you cut off one head of the Hydra, and two more are going to come in its place. So it's completely ineffective. You're never going to stop piracy, Nintendo. You can sue as many ROM sites as you want, but I can literally Google Super Mario World ROM, and within the first couple links, I will have a download for that ROM. I could absolutely go and do that right now. So why is it that if I Google Super Mario World download, it directs me to a ROM site instead of your proprietary app to download the game for a price that makes you money? It can only benefit you. And piracy is irrelevant here, because if you do not offer a competing service in a way that is better than free, or at least more convenient than free, then people will pirate it. But again, give us the service and you will get money. Piracy will go down if there is a legitimate way to buy these games. It won't go away. Piracy is never going to go away. But you will see some profits. You will see more profits than you are seeing right now, and it can only go well for you. The worst case scenario is that your app gets cracked and people start pirating it, but it doesn't matter, because people will still buy it if they really want it, and the piracy is going to be there anyway. There's going to be ROM downloads anyway, regardless of whether or not it's on PC or on mobile or on Switch or whatever. There will be a way to get them if you don't give them to us legitimately, and let us give you money. Please, Nintendo, let us give you money. And I can't be the only person that thinks this way. I mean, sure, you've got the NES Classic and the Super Nintendo Classic and the N64 Classic on the horizon, I'm sure, but that's not good enough because number one, they're all physical things and they're in short supply and they're heavily victim to scalpers and the like. And people would much rather buy these retro games digitally, I think, in most cases. I mean, sure, having an NES Classic as a collector's item is really cool. But if I wanted to buy, let's just say, one or two games from your classic lineup, then I should be able to do that digitally in a way that makes sense. And I don't think you're giving us that. I think that what you're doing with the Switch's classic game list is crap. And I think you need to expand it, whether it be, again, like a Netflix style thing or just selling us these other games. And you need to bring them to mobile and PC. It can only make you money, and the alternatives you're offering us right now ain't good enough, Nintendo. And I hope that somebody in your company watches this video and does something about it and says something to somebody higher up that can make a decision to put this kind of stuff into motion. Because, I want your company to succeed, Nintendo. I love your games. I've always loved your games. I would like to buy more of your games, but I don't have a Switch. I do have a 3DS, but I don't have a Switch. And I don't have an NES Classic or a Super Nintendo Classic or any of that stuff. And I don't plan on buying them right now. But I do have a PC. I have a very, very good gaming PC. And if you let me buy, let's say, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, I would probably buy it right now. But you won't do that. You won't let me buy these games that I love. And you really, really need to, Nintendo, because it'll make you money, your fans would love it, and there's almost no reason not to. There's virtually no drawbacks to doing it. So that's about it. That's about all I'm going to rant about today. I just wanted to address the issue of the lack of availability with your classic titles. And I could rant about other things that you've done lately, Nintendo, but I'll save that stuff for another day. Until then, that's about it. I will see you guys next time, and if you like my rants, you know the whole spiel. I'm not even going to bother telling you. You know what to do. All right, see you later. Bye-bye.